tracking is one of the most important things to learn as a visual effects artist, and so come with me and let's learn together.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. As you can see, we're in Blender 5.0 beta. Now it should be the exact same process as the final release, so no worries there. The big thing for this tutorial is in the color management, we have some new views, which is ACES 1.3 and ACES 2.0. I love that Blender natively has ACES now, so I'll show you guys how to do that. We're going to be using 1.3 today just because inside of Nuke, which is my compositor, it natively has ACES 1.3, so that is what I'm going to be using. But of course, depending on your own workflow, you can use whatever you want. We're also going to be needing DaVinci Resolve today. This is to do our color management, which I find is a hugely skipped thing in all these tutorials for camera tracking. But anyways, we'll come to our little sequence right here. Here is the footage that we're going to be using today. First of all, you can see it's in a kind of log format. And secondly, you can see we have a lot of camera movement and everything is looking good there. So we need to go ahead and get everything to look to a proper color space. Now, if you do want to work along with us for using this exact same footage, I'll provide a download link for you guys to use this. It's totally for free on my Visual Effects Oasis asset library. We also have some other details such as what's included, and also more importantly is footage specs. If you ever need any of that stuff, this is the site that I'm creating for that. It has a bunch of green screen, a bunch of HDRIs, 3D objects and stuff. So go check it out. Link is in the description down below for that. But anyways, let's go ahead and drag and drop our footage into DaVinci Resolve to start us out with. You should see that it kind of loads in and kind of looks a little bit weird. So we need to go ahead and do some color stuff to this. So we'll come over here to File, go to Project Settings, and then in Master Settings, we want to make sure a few things are checked. First of all, our resolution is in 4K, so that is looking good. Also, our frame rate is matching, so 23.976, that looks good. And then finally, in color management, this is where we want to go ahead and transform some of our stuff. We're going to be using ACES CC right here, so you want to make sure color science is ACES CC. And then the ACES version, depending on which version you're actually going to be using in Blender, you want to select that version, so ACES 1.3. Next is the input transform. Hugely important. Depending on your footage, it might be something different. But if you downloaded my footage, you can see in the actual name of the file, we have slog3 sgamut3 cine. That's because I shot it on a Sony camera using this color profile. And so depending on what footage you're downloading online, it's most of the time going to be in sRGB or Rec. 709, especially if you're using your own phone to actually capture your footage. So you do want to make sure you know that information. I provide this information right here for you guys. So if you're ever curious, always look at this. So slog3 sgamut cine. So you just want to scroll down until you find that, which is right here. You don't want the Venice version. You just want this version right here. And then the output transform, we're going to be using an EXR workflow in today's kind of tutorial. So you're going to be selecting ACES CG right here. Or come and save this down here. And as you can see, it still looks a little whack. And that is because we're actually viewing it in its ACES CG kind of transform. So let's go ahead and go to this rocket ship down here. We want to export this out. So basically right here, we have in the format, we have EXR, which is a linear image sequence format. So that's very important. A lot of visual effects artists in the industry use this format. So it should be useful for you to know as well. And then we're also doing RGB half DWAA. That just does a little bit compression, but honestly, I don't really notice too much about it. We can come over here. You can name this whatever you want and save it in a new file location. Then we can come, I like to go to File and make sure the clip starts at frame 1. You can do whatever number you want here. Some people like to work in frame 1001. And so that is where you plug this in, but I'm just going to stick it on frame 1 to keep it simple. And then add to render queue and render all up here. I already rendered this out, so I'm not going to render it again. So now you should have a folder that looks like this, a bunch of EXR sequences. And now we're finally ready to go into Blender to do some camera tracking. I know that was a convoluted process, but trust me, color management is one of the most important things you should learn as a visual effects artist. Anyways, back inside of Blender, again, we have the view set to ACES 1.3. We're going to come up to Plus, VFX, and Motion Tracking. Let's open up our EXR sequence. Once you're here, you can hit A to select everything and open the clip. And then over in the Footage tab, if you hit in case you don't see that, you want to come over to the color space and change this to ACES CG. Again, we rendered out ACES CG inside of DaVinci, so we want to make sure we keep that color space accurate. And then if we come over here, we want to set these scene frames and pre-fetch our footage just to load in a few of the things and make it a little bit easier to play back. But anyway, on frame 1 over here, so we're on the very first frame, we want to go ahead and do a few things. First is match. We want to set the match to previous frame. And then we want to check on normalize. These two things are what I always do, no matter what camera tracking I do. And then also the correlation, I'm going to set to a 0.9. That basically just means that Blender has to be 90% sure that the camera tracking is correct for it to continue camera tracking. Anyway, a few more things I want to change. Since we're on a 4K footage, we're going to be coming up to the output properties up here. We're going to change the resolution. Multiply that by 2 and also the Y as well. So we're in the proper resolution, and also the frame rate, we're going to be in 23.976. And so that is right here. So again, we want to make sure we set that up before we do camera tracking, because certain things like a few nodes actually depend on that resolution. So that's hugely important. Next, finally, is the pattern size and search size. We can hold Control and click this over here and Alt S to reveal the search area. You can see it's pretty small right now, so I'd like to increase this. I find for 4K footage, I multiply these numbers by 2. It works pretty well. All you need to know is the inner ring, the inner square is what it's going to be tracking, and then the outer square is where it's going to be looking for that tracking frame to frame. So the bigger this outer square is, the larger the area it's actually going to be looking frame to frame. But anyways, these numbers are going to be fine for us today. Again, for 4K, I usually like 42 and then 142 for the search size. Anyways, we're ready to start tracking. We're going to go ahead and detect some features up here. Now, depending on your scene, you might have more or less. We want as many as we can. So the threshold down here, and there's this little menu that you can click. Usually I'll put it to like a 0.01 right here. So it gets us a little bit more camera tracking markers in the scene. We already have a ton in the scene, so it's not really hugely important for this shot. And then the distance, you can play around with the distance as well. The shorter it is, the more tracking markers you'll probably have, because that's the distance in between each marker. So I'll just leave it on 120 for now. And there you go. Now we have all these camera tracking markers. You want to make sure you have all of them selected. And then we can either press this button right down here or hit Control T to track those forward. As you can see, they're tracking throughout our clip. It's doing a pretty good job. Now I can change the motion model if I want to over here. Usually I'll just keep it on location for this specific method of camera tracking, just to keep it a little bit easy. Now you can see a lot of markers have actually made it to the end of the clip. This is a super easy shot to actually camera track. But say you had a moment in the clip where you only had like 1 or 2 or 3 camera tracking markers that made it to the end or anything like that. That's where you need to do another set of detect features. So you would come to that moment in the clip, whether that's at the very end, the middle, or whatever there. You would come to that frame that you actually want to detect some more features. So in this case, we'll do from the very end of the footage. So I'll detect some more features here. And then we want to go ahead and control forwards and backwards. So since it's the last frame of our footage, we're going to Control Shift T, and that'll track everything backwards. Again, if you want to just click any of the buttons, there will be right here. So this button right here is to actually track backwards, and this one is to track forward. So for example, if like frame 60, we didn't have any tracking markers, you would detect some more features. Then you would Control T to track forward, come back to frame 60, Control T to track backwards right there. So just in case you run into any of that in the future, that is how you would do that. But as you can see, we have a ton of markers throughout the entirety of the footage. We are ready to get our first solve error. So I'll come over here to the solve tab. First of all, you can press keyframe to let Blender actually select the A and B keyframe. I don't like doing that because I like to manually control these. Now this is the place where there is going to be the most amount of parallax in your scene. So the most amount of camera trackers that are actually moving in your scene. So as you can see in this footage, camera trackers are pretty much moving throughout the entirety of the thing. But if you were to have a shot where you sit on a tripod and then you pick that tripod up, you would not want to select the A and B keyframe to be in that range where the tripod is stationary. You would want to select it to be in the range where the camera is actually moving, if that makes sense. So for this, I just found 45 and 60 work. You really can't go wrong with any of these for this specific shot, just because the markers are moving out throughout the entirety of the shot. So we have that. Next, we have the refined focal length, optical center, and radial distortion. If you know any of those values, you can actually come over here to track and go to the camera tab and plug in some of these values over here. I know for Visual Effects Oasis, I actually provide you guys some of those information as well. So in the footage specs, as I showed before, we have the focal length is 13 millimeter. And then also the sensor size I have as well right here. And so if you want to, you can plug in some of that information. I found in the past, personally with Blender specifically, the information over here isn't as accurate. Sometimes letting Blender kind of find it out itself is actually better, I find. But if you want to experiment and plug some of those values in, like the sensor width and the focal length over here, you can totally play around with that since I do provide some of that information. But anyways, we'll just leave it as is over here to keep it as simple as possible, because most of the time, if you're doing this footage, you're not going to know that information. But we'll come over here, we'll go ahead and solve the camera motion. And there you go. We have two things I want to call attention to. First is the solve error right up here. We have a 2.54, which is really good for 4K footage. So that is a good first solve error. And then also we have this graph section down here. There's this blue line now, and it kind of goes throughout our footage. You might notice the blue line is very kind of jagged and shaky. That basically is our solve error line. So we want our solve error to be as low as possible. And we also want this blue line here to be as stable as possible. So that means as straight as possible. No, none of these kind of jagged hills and stuff like that. So what we can do to actually solve this is we need to go over and clean up the track. So I'll go to the cleanup section over here. We'll go to clean tracks. That pulls up this menu down here. I'm going to push this reprojection error up until we're selecting maybe like the top 10% or the top 20% of tracks. So as you can see, we have this many tracking markers selected over here. These are roughly about the top 10%. We're going to go ahead and delete these tracks over here, and let's resolve the camera motion. The idea is that each of these times we're selecting the worst camera tracking markers, and each time we do that, we're going to make our solve error go lower and lower. The reason I don't do it all at the start is because I find if you do it each time iteratively, it'll select worse and worse tracks each time and leave the better trackers from the start. And so as you can see already, our solve error is lower, and this blue line is a little bit more straight. We can get it a little bit more straight, I believe. So we're going to come and clean the tracks again. We're going to do another set. So top 10% looks good. We'll delete those and solve the camera motion over here. And then we have a 1.01 pixel solve error, and our line is much straighter. Let's do it one more time. I think we can sorry, I didn't mean to click that. Let's do clean tracks instead. I think we can delete a lot more. All you need in Blender is just 8 tracks to have between the whole entire footage. But I like to do a little bit more just to kind of have more information in the scene. We have a 0.8, and for 4K footage, that is totally fine. I'm going to leave it at that. But as you can see, we have less tracking markers on our scene, but our solve line is much straighter, and it's going to lead to a better solve in the long run. Okay, so now we are ready to go ahead and actually orient our scene and get our scene set up to do some 3D up here. So first of all, we need to go ahead and set the background and the tracking scene. And that does a few things for us. First of all, is it adds all these collections and stuff up here. Now, for sake of simplicity, I find that these collections confuse a lot of people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete them up here. Also, we don't need this light. I'll keep the ground and the cube for now, but that is dependent on what you want to do with this actual scene. Next is it makes a new view layer up here. We only need the foreground view layer in my own workflow. I never use the background view layer. I don't like how Blender automatically makes that. I find it complicates a lot of things for beginners, but we'll go ahead and delete that as well. And then finally, the final thing that those 2 buttons did is in the compositing tab, it set up a lot of stuff. It set up these render layers nodes. Since I only have one view layer now, I can go ahead and delete this one and this alpha over. These over here, I'll go ahead and try to demonstrate what they're doing. As you can see, if I hold V to zoom out just so we can see, this is the original footage. And then this is our movie distortion. You can see how it kind of bows out the actual edges of the frame. This is to do with lens distortion, if you've ever heard about that in a visual effects camera tracking workflow. What we need to do is we need to add movie distortion, or in our case, lens distortion, to the actual clip so that our camera tracking doesn't look like it slides around the ground. I'll try to kind of work through this in a little bit, but just know that that is what these nodes are doing. So we don't want to delete them yet. And these nodes are set up by those buttons that we just pressed. Anyways, we'll come back to motion tracking. I'm going to go ahead and set up the ground plane. You can see all of our points in the 3D space up here are not on the actual ground plane of our scene. So we need to go ahead and set that. So I'll come over here. We have the orientation tab. This is super easy for this shot because we have a lot of points on the actual floor. But all we need is we need to select 3 points on the floor. So I'll just select these random 3 right here. Those are looking good. We'll come over to the orientation, go and click floor. And now we have our floor correctly defined. And as you can see now, if we zoom out, all of these little markers are on the actual floor plane. So that is really good. Next, we want to go ahead and set up the scale of the scene. The scale is hugely important for many things, including ambient occlusion, focal distance, and everything like that. What we need to do is we need to select like 2 points in our scene. So I'll select this one and this point right here. I didn't really take measurements on the day, but we can guesstimate a little bit. I would guess from knowing when I shot this scene, it would probably be about 1 foot away from each other, these 2 points right here. So what I'm going to do is let's go to set scale with 2 of those selected. This distance number is actually in meters. So we need to go ahead and convert this from meters to anything that you want to do. So I'm going to do feet. So 1 foot to meter is about 0.3 something feet. So we'll go ahead and copy that number into here and paste that. There we go. So now if I come into the camera view, you can see nothing has really changed, but that's because the scale was probably already set up close to correct like that. But that is pretty much the correct scale of our scene. You can come over here. I can kind of demonstrate this real quickly. The camera is roughly around like right here where this dot is. And I'm about 6 foot person. And so I filmed this around my kind of waist level. And so this is about as tall as I am. I will scale it down a little bit. So this is as tall as I am. This camera right here, again, was filmed around my waist. And so that roughly matches up. My waist would be around this area. And so that's kind of how you can double check if you don't know the specific scale value of your scene. So yeah, so that looks about right to my eye. We can go ahead and delete that cube. We don't need that cube anymore. The final thing I want to go ahead and showcase, we'll come into here. I'll go ahead and go to the render properties. We'll go film transparent just so we can see the background a little bit better. In case you're curious, in the camera view, we have background images set to our movie clip. That's how I was able to see the actual footage up here. But anyway, I want to go ahead and orient the actual scene to be a little bit better. So I'll select my origin where I want the center of the scene to be. So we'll say this dot right here is where I want the center to be. Go ahead and set the origin right there. So now you can see our origin point is that little marker. And then next I want to do the x-axis. So I'll make like this point up here to be our x-axis right down here. And now the scene is rotated. It might be a little bit hard to see, but now our scene is rotated to the kind of origin and x-axis I defined. So that's how you do the rotation of the scene. But yeah, that is pretty much it about it being set up for the 3D scene. We'll come back out to the layout tab and come into the camera view. There are a few things I want to showcase that you can do here. First of all is we don't see our camera tracking markers anymore. So we'll come over here and go to the motion tracking tab. And now we can bring these markers back in if you ever need to see these at all. You can change these size as well and the camera path if you ever need to. But that is how you do that. I'm going to turn these off because I don't really need these anymore. Next is the ground plane. The ground plane is actually set up if you go into the object properties and then down to visibility. It's set up to be a masked shadow catcher. And so what that means is that if we go ahead and place a cube in the scene, we'll go ahead and just place a kind of cube in the center of our scene right here. And then just to do some world lighting, I'll turn the scene lighting off real quick and I'll do something that has a sun in it. So there you go. Now we have a sun in the actual shot. And you can see we don't see anything on the actual plane right here, but we do see the shadow in the actual world right here. And so that is what the shadow catcher is doing. Now, one quick thing about the shadow catcher is that whatever the color the shadow catcher is actually what it's going to be bouncing onto our object in here. So for example, if we wanted to match this scene as much as possible, we could come here and do this. If I change it to red, you can see what I'm talking about. Now there's like this red hue or this purple hue and stuff right here, right? We need to actually change it to be more of a color like this. So we can go ahead and just pick select this to be this color. That's just a super simple workflow. I'm not going to go too into depth exactly how to match this shot for visual effects or anything like that. I have plenty of tutorials going over exactly how to do that on my YouTube channel. So I'll have a few that I recommend in the description down below. But yeah, anyways, that is that. And then, of course, like I said before, in the camera tab, we have the background images over here and 2 things here. So I'm going to change the opacity up. So this is just the opacity of the actual footage. It's in ACES CG because, again, we're using that EXR format over here. And then the final thing that I want to call attention to is the render undistorted. So if I turn this on and off, you can see it's actually distorting our image. when you're doing anything inside of the 3D viewport, you want to have this checked. The reason being is because we're going to be doing some lens distortion workflow inside of Blender. And so whatever we, let's say I actually want to delete some of these things. If I want to model out this line in the actual thing, I'll go ahead and place this over here. Let's go to edit mode. I'll bring this over here and say, I want to just, I only care about this line. I'll go ahead and subdivide this and then bring this little point right there. So there you go. Now I have this line of this concrete basically modeled out as much as I can for now. If I was instead working, if we'll go back to the camera, if I was instead working on the undistorted footage, you can see now at the edges, it's more pronounced at the edges. You can see our line now doesn't match up at all. You can see now it's kind of broken over here. And that is because of lens distortion. So if I enable it again, you can see now the line is matching. So again, you want to have this checked whenever you're doing anything in the viewport. And that's because when we now come to the compositing tab, this is now to do with this movie distortion node. This is something I find a lot of camera tracking tutorials actually skip over, but it's very, very important. And what we want to do is let's go ahead and render out that little image of our little ground plane just to use as reference in this composite. So we have this right here. What we need to do is instead of actually distorting our movie footage, again, this is distorting the footage. You never want to distort your actual footage in a visual effects workflow like this, just because the footage actually has stuff like noise data and stuff baked into it that we would be breaking if we actually distort the footage itself. So instead, we want to go ahead and plug this directly into the alpha over. And then we want to bring these two nodes down here. We'll plug the render layers. Again, our render layers is the actual cube thing that we're rendering over here. And now if we plug these in, you can see this is what it's doing. And our movie distortion node, it is distorting our little CG. Now it might be hard to tell because there's not a lot of distortion in this actual lens I was using. But you can see it's distorting it out a little bit, especially like over here on the side. If I zoom in a little bit here and on and off that, you can see it's actually moving a little bit. However, this is actually wrong. Whenever you do a movie clip, you're actually wanting to undistort the lens distortion because it has lens distortion baked into it. But when we render in Blender, we don't have any lens distortion in the render layers node. So instead of undistorting it, we want to distort it. So just keep that in mind. Undistort is for movie clips. Distort is for render layers right here. So now that we have this, this is actually the correct way. You can see it's still distorting it, but instead of adding lens distortion to it, or sorry, instead of taking away lens distortion, it's adding lens distortion. So now this is what we want to plug into the foreground and over here. So we'll go ahead and zoom back out. And now you should see if I turn this on and off, let's zoom in. I hate how Blender has this stupid little background thing or whatever. But anyway, if I turn this on and off, you can see here is with the fix and here is before the fix. If you remember, we lined this little side up to this line on the actual thing. And if we add the distortion in, that line is being corrected. If we didn't have that distortion, the model to how we are modeling out here actually doesn't line up anymore. So just keep that in mind. You want to have movie distortion because if you don't, anything that you're doing in the 3D viewport is actually going to be wrong. And anything that you do might look like it's sliding. This is why people have come to me in the past and they've had perfect solve errors, but when they go on a compositing, they're not adding lens distortion. And so it still looks like the objects are sliding around in the scene. But anyway, that is pretty much it. That is the entire camera tracking process. I know that was very confusing, but just know that when you learn this camera tracking process inside of Blender, you're going to be doing everything like this. Like for this specific shot, I could probably camera track this in less than 2 minutes, right? Okay, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That is the entire workflow. If you do this workflow, let me know what you think, as well as follow our Patreon and Discord. I would love to meet some of you guys over there, so follow those down in the description below. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.